elevator pitch or format that you usually use when pitching a new product? Perhaps even a template or description that Pragmatic uses that you can point me to. And she also says, thanks so much for these sessions. She truly gets a ton out of them.
Okay, so a format or a structure for that kind of idea pitch, things like that. I'm trying to recall the name of there is a VC person whose name will come to me, was an early evangelist at Apple and did really, really well there. And they use what's called a 30-20-10 kind of format. And that 30-20-10 format, basically what they say is at this VC firm, you can pitch any idea you want as long as you follow their 30-20-10 rule. And the 30-20-10 is you have 30 minutes and no font on your slide can be less than 20 point, and you have a maximum of 10 slides. And they actually go out and explain what that 30-20-10 is. And I can't right now, the name of that person slips my mind. But that's and if you go to the website, they actually have they have the layout of the 10 slides and what they like to see in the pitch and so on. For your own internal organizations, I would find out what is the big things that they care about. A lot of times they have specific structure or specific content that they want to see. But keep those kind of rules in mind, right? You got 30 minutes, nothing smaller than 20 point font, and 10 slides total to be able to present your idea. There's lots of kind of guidance around that talks about, keeping it distinct. If you can't articulate your strategy in, a limited number of slides and a limited amount of time, then you don't really have a strategy that you're trying to communicate. So, I'll try and find it. Eddie, I see you've joined. Maybe if you could go look for that 30-20-10. I'm trying to remember who it's a guy that was an evangelist for Apple that's running a VC firm right now. And I'm sorry, it's just slipped my mind at the moment. But worst case, Callie, we'll put it in the comments or something like that. I'll come back and
Guy Kawasaki, is that him?
Guy Kawasaki. Yes, that's exactly who it is. Guy Kawasaki. So that's a good starting place, I think, that I would begin with, and then tune that for your unique audiences and so on. I think that's one of the biggest things is you've got to keep in mind, and this is true for any presentation you put together. What is the audience I'm sharing this information with, and why am I sharing it? And then you can structure it. And Kawasaki has kind of said, okay, if you're going to speak to us about an opportunity, here's what you need to keep in mind. So.
Great, yeah, that's really helpful. Clear and concise is the way to go. So this next one, Steve, comes from Yoshi, and it's interesting. This is another will I, which one question, which I know we talk a lot about in our pricing course. And we actually had Amy and Paul Young on last week who talked a little bit about it. But Yoshi asks, my question revolves around asking the will I or which one question. So our product price is about $300,000 US as a B2B product. In this case, customers will certainly consider thinking deeply before they make their buying decision. But if our product is new to the market with no other competitors, does that mean that our product will consistently remain a will I if there are no other options?
So great question, Yoshi. And the short answer to your question is yes, it will remain a will I product for as long as you have no competition. The way you've got to think about will I versus which one decision is what is the decision that buyer is making at the point of purchase, at the time they buy. Are they saying, will I, yes, and then which one of these alternatives, in which case it's a which one product, or are they only saying, will I buy or not? And in this case, since there's no competition, they're not only looking at which one, right, because there's no competition. So it will remain a will I product as long as there is no competition. Now, having said all that will I versus which one really doesn't have any impact on the length of the decision, right? How long it takes them to make a decision. There may be lots of buying criteria that they're evaluating to answer that will I question, right? So, yeah, the answer to the question for Yoshi is, yeah, it'll be a will I decision that they're making as long as there's no competition. Now, one thing we do have to kind of think of in that area, sometimes we'll fool ourselves into believing it's a will I decision because we don't, quote, have any competitors. But sometimes what happens is people go through that and they say, will I solve this problem, right? Or will I buy in this category? And they say yes. And then they say, can I do it myself, or do I need to buy from a vendor? So sometimes it's a which one decision because they're comparing us to do it themselves. So do it themselves may be a competitor that sways that from a will I to a which one. But if they don't consider it doing themselves, if they really spend a long time evaluating and saying, you know, am I going to get the benefit that's worth it for the price, then it's a will I decision.
Great. Yeah, me and Yoshi went back and forth on email a little bit yesterday. I think he's watching on YouTube Live now. So
Yeah.
hopefully that was helpful, Yoshi. Steve, got another one for you here. This one comes from Mike N. Mike says, one of my Q4 2020 goals is to construct a product management framework that we can start to adopt within the group to help us make better decisions. This would involve selling the benefits. Do you have any strategies that you use to sell the pragmatic framework to encourage others to send their staff to training?
Okay, so great question. When you started that question, my first thought was, yeah, as a matter of fact, I do have a pretty good framework that I kind of like that you can use to manage products. And it's got 37 squares on it, and, you know, they're kind of organized pretty neatly. But then they got to the back half of that question. I think the best thing that we have available to you, we actually have a slide deck that we have created for people to use within their own organization to do exactly what was mentioned there, to essentially sell the pragmatic approach, the market-driven approach inside their own companies. So that's a resource that we have available to those. The best bet to get that, Sarah, I don't know if that's reaching out via the registrar or reaching out. I don't know. I'm not sure the best way to get that in folks' hands, but that deck does exist. And it's got speaker notes in it, and, you know, it talks about what pragmatic is and the history and, you know, the benefits the organization can expect to see and things like that. So I'm not sure.
We have a cameo from Mr. Eddie Gordon today, who I believe does quite a bit of that design work for us. So I do know that tool does exist.
Yeah, that deck is definitely out there.
Yeah, I can get it to you. Maybe we'll stick a link in the show notes and stuff like that. That's what we'll do.
Yeah.
Sarah has also dropped a comment in the chat area there to go to registrar@pragmaticinstitute.com with that request, and then we'll tie it back. The deck itself is really designed to be used by people who have been through our classes. So people have come and said, hey, I want to bring this into our organization. So you really kind of need that background to understand and understand the notes and be able to position it appropriately. So that would be the only thing. But that's what that deck was specifically designed to do, was to allow people to, explain the benefit inside their own organization.
Yeah, and Steve, we talked a little bit about, the elevator pitch early on, right? Like if you got into an elevator and you had 10 floors to convince someone why they should take our training, I mean, what do you think the biggest benefits are?
Yeah, so I think, if you look it over, there are soft benefits that people often tell us about, things like, I want to get everybody, exactly the background that Mike's talking about here. I want to get everybody on the same page. I want to have a common set of nomenclature and those kinds of things. So there's soft benefits, but also out on our website, you can see some of the hard benefits. That it's more that what I would call empirical benefits that people have seen. Like we've been able to get our products to market faster. Our customer satisfaction scores have improved. Our ROIs are better. Our cost to produce is lowered. So we have better margins, some things like that. So fundamentally, if you are in the market, you understand the market, you're using a market-driven approach, you're going to build better products, and you're going to get those products to market faster. I mean, that's just the empirical output that we see over and over and over again. Even though a lot of the reasons people come to us are around that common nomenclature and common way to have the conversation based on the framework. So yeah, that's kind of the way I would look at that, think about that.
Yeah, and Sarah had posted, reaching out to the registrar, and we have all sorts of, terrific case studies across all sorts of industries, big, small, statistics, et cetera. So if you guys are looking for anything in particular to sort of push that, we're available to help. Steve, this next one comes from Tyreek. I'm currently helping define the GTM as one of 2 sales reps at a seed stage startup. I'm trying to identify where to start and what gap to address first. Our 3 founders are all extremely technical. What are the fundamentals or areas to focus on at a seed stage startup? Say that 3 times fast, with no marketing team.
Yeah. So see, it is hard to say. Seed stage startups are a very interesting kind of beast. Generally speaking, what's the best way I can put this? Quite often, seed stage startups begin with a good idea for a product or a concept. If the founders are technologically based, there's a good chance they said, "Hey, I got this great technology. I think we can go build some of this stuff. Let's go ahead and go do it." Right? They may not have said, "What problem can I solve using this kind of technology?" Right? Or what problems are we trying to solve? So the number one orientation that I would have or number one bit of feedback for go-to-market for a seed state, that thing that we just talked about, that startup, would be to make sure you have a very good ability to articulate the problem that you're trying to solve. And if you know internally within the organization the problem you're trying to solve, then that's great. Let's go, formalize that. Let's put it into a positioning document, something like that. So that's definitely where I would focus first. Let's make sure we can articulate the problem that we're trying to solve. And then all that other market communication is going to flow out of that. All your messages and messaging, your being able to target specific personas from a buying perspective, right? All that kind of stuff is going to just naturally flow out of that. So I would start with making sure I can articulate the problems, creating that positioning document, and then move from there. It's interesting the different stages that companies go through. I used to tell people I've worked with startups all the way through. I think the smallest company I was a startup, and I was employee number 6, and the largest one was Texas Instruments. And at the point in time I was there, I think we had 84,000 employees. So kind of been in that range. And I often tell people, the startup life was actually pretty straightforward. Because each day I showed up at work saying, okay, what do I need to do today to keep the lights on tomorrow? And then we were able to keep the lights on for a while. And then I said, okay, what do I need to do to keep the lights on for next week? And then what do I need to do to keep the lights on next month? And about that point in time where I said, okay, what do I need to do to keep the lights on next month? That's when things got difficult, because now we had trade-offs. We had choices with regards to where we could apply our time and where we could apply resources and all that kind of stuff. So a lot of challenges, a lot of struggles in those early stage startups, but there's also a level of clarity that you have there that becomes a little more cloudy as you move through and grow as an organization. So
yeah,
I don't know that I've ever tried to say seed stage startup before. I like that.
I know, and he had it twice in there, so it was definitely a tricky one for me. But Tyreek, hopefully that was helpful. I think that's some really good insight from Steve. So Steve, this next one comes from Pam, who's wondering about organization model ideas. So she says, I'm looking for organizational model ideas for structuring our product team and our roles. All suggestions are welcome. So it sounds like she's kind of just starting out as well, looking to define and create.
Yeah, maybe creating a new product team or bringing some new disciplines in, perhaps. For that one, I think the best thing to do is point you to the gap analysis that we talk about in our foundations course. The gap analysis basically takes the 37 activities on the framework, and we ask a set of questions that are especially valuable when you're doing this formation kind of thing. The first of those questions is, who's responsible for a specific activity on the framework today? And that leads to some interesting discussion and debate. And then we ask the more important question, who should be responsible on a go-forward basis? And we want to answer those questions not by name, but by title or what role. So, what are the product management roles versus product marketing management versus whatever titles you have in that product team. So that begins to give you some alignment there. A second part of that gap analysis is helping you understand priorities. And so we ask, how important is a given activity to our success, the success of the company or the success of the product? And then we ask, how well are we doing it? And we score those things and calculate a gap. And that gives us an understanding then of where the largest gaps are between things that are important to us and our execution. If we've got something that's really, really important to us, we're not executing very well, then that subject area, that activity should be a pretty high focus for us. You may encounter things that are not that important to your success, but you're really good at it. And sometimes that tells you where you're putting too much focus and too many resources against an activity that's, maybe not all that important to your success. So I would point you back to that gap analysis, invite, management level representation into that discussion. So we have a very thorough discussion. You're going to have some adult conversation because nobody's job's more important than mine and nobody does it better than I do. But you get all those folks in the room and have that discussion and that debate, then you can start to tease out those things, org structure, priorities, and really build upon those as you work an execution plan to close those gaps.
Yeah. Out of all of the training I've done, that was one of my favorite exercises. I mean, I just feel like it just gives you such clarity. It just really gives you those light bulb moments where, what to pursue first. That was one of my favorites. And I know that we have that at, in the ARC, in our Alumni Resource Center. We also have it in the PAC. So if folks are looking for that template, they can easily find it in those locations. So that's great.
Yeah, that tool in the PAC and in the Alumni Center will step you directly through the process and the question. We can facilitate them. We can work with your organization if you want us to be the referee of the fistfights that break out. We're happy to do that and facilitate that. But the tool is in both those resource centers for you, so you can do it yourself if you like.
Really helpful. So here, this one is a little bit looking for a little bit of clarification on roles. So this comes from Steve Green. I'm applying for an IT services marketing and IT services portfolio management position at a major computer hardware company. What are the key differences between product marketing and services marketing from a pragmatic perspective?
Good question. What are the differences in the way you define that stuff? Right. One of the things I always like to talk about in my classes is, we use product, the word product, the term product. We talk about product. I usually when it comes up in the class, I usually say, you've heard me say, we're 10 minutes into this class and you've heard me use the term product probably 100 times in this first 10 minutes or 50 times, right? Which means it's probably worth defining what is product, what is a product, what do we mean by that? And for us, a product is anything that solves a problem in a repeatable fashion. Right? That's the way we like to think of a product. Anything that solves a problem in a repeatable fashion, which means that product could be hardware, could be software, could be services, could be a combination of all that stuff that it takes to go solve that problem in the market in a repeatable kind of way. And so what's the difference between a product and a service and product management versus services management? It's all in the definition that the given organization applies to that. Sometimes services have the implication that we're going to use some of our own vendor resources for implementation and management and support. So we call it a service. Sometimes there are managed services, and then you throw in software as a service, and then you throw in, there's all kinds of different subcultures almost, if you will, around that services environment. So I would start out with a product, and the real differences, to be honest with you, between something that's pure software, pure hardware, pure services, or some combination of all that stuff. The biggest difference is in the interdependencies, right? If I have hardware and software and services that are part of my delivery to the market, then I'm dependent on what the hardware can do and dependent on what the software can enable and the version of the software. And I'm dependent on the resources and the skill sets that I have in my professional services organization. But the concepts and how we manage those things, it's a product, right? And it's managed the same way. It's just things like, I had a product manager one time that worked for me that had worked and was a hardware product manager. Historically, he came to work for us in a software environment, and he did a great job. And he'd been on with us, maybe working for me 3 months, 4 months. And I asked him one time, I said, what's the biggest difference between managing hardware and managing software? And he said, in software, your product doesn't get stuck in the supply chain on a boat between China and here. Right? To him, he managed it the exact same way. The supply chain was very different, and the things you had to worry about were different because he had those import constraints. But he said the true product management, all the same stuff. The things you worry about, solving problems in the market, delivering to the market, same stuff.
Yeah. And I think his interview's early next week, he said. So hopefully, he's listening and he's able to grab that intel before he goes. And we hope he gets.
What he should do is take a copy of the framework with him, and in the interview, pull that framework out and say, okay, what are you talking about with these roles? Show me the activities that you envision in being a part of that. And that'll kind of get everybody on the same page to kick things off. And if the person he's interviewing with is a pragmatic practitioner as well, he just scored a leg up on everybody else by doing that.
Yeah, I was going to say that's some icing on the cake right there. Going to make you be memorable. Well, great. We'll just want to shoot a little reminder to the folks that are on the call now. We have about 15 more minutes of Steve's time. So, any questions you have, feel free to put them in the chat and send them to me personally or to the group as a whole. But in the meantime, I suppose we'll move on here. Steve, this next one comes from Dominic Kessler, who says, any suggestions on how to build a competitive strategy for a SaaS B2B company against a direct competitor? New to this, so appreciate any insights that you can offer.
Yeah, so building competitive strategies, and it really kind of goes back to the previous discussion around defining what a product is. And we also talked a little bit about defining what competitors are, right, in that which one decision discussion. In general, and we discuss competitive analysis in a fair level of detail in our focus course, but in general, the thing we want you to do first is perform a SWOT analysis, right? Look at your strengths and weaknesses of your own internal organization. Look at the opportunities and threats that you're facing. So that traditional SWOT analysis that's been around a long time, that's a good place to begin that process. And then you want to think about the differences, right? Then you want to analyze. What am I uniquely good at? Why does the market buy from me, right? Leverage my distinctive competencies. Whether you're the market leader or not is going to impact that. If we're the market leader, we want to grow the overall category. If we're not the market leader, then there are a number of other strategies we want to take to offset that leadership position, things that we could go do. If you're strictly asking what is the difference or how do I compete if I'm a software as a service provider versus a traditional on-premise kind of competitor, I think we have to, and I think we often lose sight of this as we're in the market. I think software as a service companies say, yeah, of course, everybody's moving to SaaS. They want SaaS. Everybody loves SaaS. I've got a SaaS product, therefore I'm better than the competition. I think you have to go back and say, why are people interested in SaaS? Why do people want to move to SaaS? It's things like total cost of ownership, right? I don't have to have all this data center infrastructure. I don't have to have all these IT people to manage this. You got to consider some of the negatives. Right now, I'm putting some of my security infrastructure in somebody else's hands, right? So there are pros and cons. So if you're strictly looking and saying, I've got a SaaS offering that does the same thing as an on-prem offering, an on-prem competitor, the difference being the SaaS model, then the benefit between the two, or the benefit for your solution over that traditional on-prem competitor, is related to SaaS itself, right? That business model. Why is it important? Maybe it's I don't have to make much investment up front, and if I'm on a subscription kind of model, I have the opportunity to move off of that and on to a competitor. Another thing you've got to think about, but really you need to understand the value of your model versus the value of the competition. And then that's going to bring you into that pricing discussion and some of the other things we talked about as well.
Great. Here's one that talks about cultivating a stronger relationship with sales. This one comes from Richard and says, in what ways can I gain more visibility in the sales pipeline so that I can figure out why the key customers are, who the key customers are that I should be visiting? Excuse me. Are there specific ways or tactics that I can use to cultivate a stronger relationship with my sales team?
All right. Can I ask you to repeat that one, Callie? Because I think there's 3 questions in there.
Yeah, absolutely. In what ways can I gain more visibility in the sales pipeline so that I can figure out
number 1.
Yep. who the key customers are that I should be visiting?
2.
Are there specific ways or tactics I can use to cultivate a stronger relationship with my sales team?
That's 3. Yeah. So the first part, greater visibility into the sales pipeline. Hopefully, and this is not always the case, but hopefully you've got access to, well, first of all, I guess hopefully you have a CRM solution that the sales team is using to manage sales pipeline and sales processes and so on. If you have access to that, you can typically see what's going on in the pipeline if you understand that. Even better than that, if the sales team will allow you to sit in on their sales pipeline reviews. Right now you can hear firsthand what's going on in that pipeline. What are the challenges, the issues that people are running into, right? As the salespeople are running into as they're trying to convert those deals. That's a great one. Sometimes salespeople are a little hesitant to allow product people or outsiders into that pipeline review because they're afraid we're going to try to tell them how to sell or tell them what they're doing wrong or whatever. Our real goal in setting in on those sessions is to understand where things are getting stuck, right? What are the challenges that are coming up during the sales process that we in product may be able to help them mitigate? So that's the way I would look at the first 2 bits of advice. Gain access to those pipeline reports, and you could probably do that through your CRM system. If you can set in on the pipeline reviews, that's going to be some great insight. Question number 2, so I can determine which customers are the best ones for me to visit. Keep in mind your customers are only one part of your market. And also keep in mind that those customers have already bought, right? So they may not be able to tell you what you need to do for future sales, right? To drive that future growth, right? And really increase those sales efforts. So I would argue that there is no bad customer to talk to. You're going to learn something from all of those folks. We often in our classes talk about the noisy 20% that are going to be proactive and come to us versus the quiet 80% that we have to be proactive and go to them. So make sure you're getting a good balance of feedback from noisy 20 and quiet 80, but also make sure you're not just getting feedback from customers and from your customers. Make sure you're also getting feedback from others who are in that market or that market segment, but may not be customers of yours today, right? Lead to all kinds of new opportunities. Third part of that question, how can I build a better relationship and do better with my sales team? The number one thing you have to think about when you're considering that is a recognition that salespeople are singularly focused, right? They are focused on one thing. They are the one part of the organization who knows very clearly what they're being held accountable for. They know very clearly and exactly what their responsibilities are. They probably get a monthly report card that comes along with that commission report that tells them exactly how well they're doing against their goals. And from a salesperson perspective, and there are exceptions, but most successful salespeople look at the world and say, you're helping me to sell or you're not. My job is to sell. I'm good at selling. I understand that. And you're either helping me or you're not. So the short answer to that question, given that background, is the best thing you can do to build a relationship with your sales team is to help them sell. The thing you have to watch out for is your job is not to, from a product perspective, your job is not to help a salesperson sell. Your job is to help the sales team sell. So what can I do for the team? What can I do to move deals forward, not a deal forward? So you've kind of got to look at it from that perspective. But go to your sales team and say, hey, what challenges are you experiencing? Can you tell me where these deals are getting stuck? Can I sit in on this pipeline review to hear what you guys are facing, what the sales team, what challenges they're facing, so I can see what I can do? Maybe I've got the wrong product. Maybe I've got the wrong message. Maybe I've got you pointed at the wrong buyer, right? Maybe I don't understand the buying process the way I should. Help me, give me access to that kind of information. Let's have those discussions, because then I can help you to sell. So if you want to build a relationship with a salesperson, sit down and find out how you can make them more successful in selling. That's what it's all about.
Yeah. And I love how you really took the time to break that down for Richard, Steve. So that's fantastic. And I noticed we just had a couple folks pop in. So happy to have you. As we always say, these are office hours. They're casual, come late, leave early. We're just happy to have you here the chat product. So welcome. In the meantime, how about a question from Rhonda, Steve? This one goes, what are some ways that I can best manage stakeholder expectations during this COVID pandemic? I feel like that's what a lot of people are wondering.
Yeah, I mean, I've actually this week taught 2 organizations, both of which were in different aspects of the healthcare industry. And we talk about urgency of problems, urgent, pervasive, willingness to pay, and all that kind of stuff. And you want to talk about an urgent driver in those businesses, and something that has completely refocused those 2 organizations that I was teaching in here for the last 6-9 months, whatever it's been at this point. I think to answer the question, Rhonda's question specifically, I think it really comes back to which of the stakeholders is she talking about? Is she talking about stakeholders that are in the market, or is she talking about stakeholders in her own organization? Right? What does that look like? I feel that most stakeholders inside our own companies probably have a pretty good, realistic understanding of the impact of COVID on our businesses and our resource availability and our, all kinds of things like that. I do think there are some exceptions to this. I had one example today, actually in a class this morning I was teaching, where somebody had a cousin that was a nurse, and they were interviewing this cousin, and she was I guess like an emergency room nurse in working night shifts. And she ended up leaving, not because of all the stress and all the chaos and everything that she was having to deal with. She was worked in a facility, I think just outside Detroit. But the problem was I guess if you work in that environment, it makes total sense that they were working nights, and their manager had them working every other night. So 1 on, 1 off, 1 on, 1 off. What they really wanted was, let me work 2 nights in a row or 3 nights in a row so I can focus on this, and they give me a break from all the stress and the chaos, and let me go spend time with my family, and then bring me back on for 2 or 3 more days in a row, whatever it might be. So I tell that story to recognize that even sometimes in our own organizations, we have to state what is the human impact, right? It's not just a business impact. It's an emotional impact. It's a human impact. If it's stakeholders in the market that Rhonda is speaking with, most likely those people are having the same, have the same kinds of impacts, right? I do think there's a lot of stress and conflict right now around, you look at things like personal protective equipment, right? Everybody needs it. I want it. I got to have it. It's literally life in some cases, but the supply chains are very constrained. So you've got to set stakeholder expectations. How do we kind of manage that? So I think, my best advice with those kinds of organizations or those kinds of discussions is, look, just sit down and have a realistic discussion and say, I understand, but here's the realistic situation we're in. I'm not trying to make you any promises. I'm not trying to, tell you any untruths or stretch the truth or anything like that. Here's the reality, right? Here's the realistic situation we're in. If you can kind of establish that reality baseline, both from a personal perspective as well as perhaps an organizational perspective, now you can start to induce that empathy, right? You've got to have that, look, I understand the situation you're in, but let's discuss the big picture, right? Here's the situation I'm in. Let's have empathy with one another, and let's see how we can move together for, stakeholder versus the material, the information I'm trying to present. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and I think that like who doesn't, understand and sort of feel what we're all going through, and certainly that transcends beyond business. So
yeah, I've had to live with my wife more in the last 6 months than I lived with her in the last 25 years, right? You want to talk about an impact? Let's talk about stakeholder communications, all right?
I love it. It's hilarious. Well, we're almost up to our time, but Steve, you feel like doing one more?
Sure.
Okay. So this one comes from Jonathan, and Jonathan says, looking for examples to illustrate the buy, build, or partner decision, steps to take, questions to ask, or what are some ways you suggest that I go about approaching this?
All right. Build, buy, or partner decisions. That's another good topic. Also, when we cover in that focus course, and fundamentally what we say is it starts with your distinctive competencies, right? Let's understand what we do uniquely well. And when we're making a build, buy, or partner decision, we want our resources focused on those things that we do uniquely well. So it kind of has a precursor that you have to be able to define those distinctive competencies, but then you're making a build, buy, or partner decision. You say, is this something that that my resources are really good at, that we're focused on? It's a core part of our business. It's a distinctive competency for us. If it is, then that's something we should go build, right? We want to apply our resources. We want to go forward and do that. If it's not, then that's an opportunity to either buy or partner. And the guidance we give is you should buy those plug-in components, right? Modular kind of stuff that maybe you plug into your overall solution. Things like in the technology world, database drivers or communication modules or shopping carts in a website, right? Plug those things in. Go buy those, go license those, and just embed them in your product. For everything else, then you want to go partner, right? If it's not a part of your core competency, it's not directly a plug-in, then let's go partner for that other area. So start with the first question is this a part of my distinctive competencies? Is this something I'm uniquely positioned to deliver, or is in line with the other things that I do very well? Yes or no? If no, is it a plug-in, something that's modular that I can go buy? Then I buy it. Otherwise, I partner for it. So that's the way I would structure that thought process.
Yeah, certainly makes sense. Well, Steve, thank you so much for lending us your time and letting us pick your brain. We always love having you. For everybody else, like I said, we're here every week, every Friday at 1:30 Eastern. We have our AMA office hours with a different pragmatic instructor. And also, if you like these offerings, we have more of them. We have our product chat series. Our next one is taking place next Tuesday. This is November 10th at 1:30 p.m. Eastern. We have Natasha Naran. She's the CEO and co-founder of Iceberg IQ. And we have Tim Rhodes as well. He's our enterprise product marketing consultant for a discussion that they're having on decoding no decisions using win-loss analysis. So we hope you'll join us for that. As always, you can find our offerings on all of our social media channels. And in the meantime, we hope that everyone stays safe, has a great weekend. And Steve, thanks again.
My pleasure, everybody. Have a great weekend. Thanks a lot.